Well, okay, everybody. I am so excited to be here today, and thank you, Nicole, for that awesome introduction, and thank you, Holly, for this awesome opportunity. Today is about the Seeds for Success, and I am really excited to have this opportunity to have such amazing entrepreneurs here with me today and with all of us. So it's really cool to be able to ask them questions. It's a very diverse panel. So what I'll do is I'll do a little bit of introduction about all of them. And we will start with Jen Harper. So Jen Harper is the founder of Cheekbone Beauty. Jen Harper was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and relocated. And relocated to Niagara region, where she was raised and developed a passion for cosmetics. For Jen, makeup has become a means of expression that she feels has amazing power. There needs to be a brand that was made in Canada, that was never tested on animals, free of parabens, and that gave back to the First Nation community. The brand did not exist, so Jen created it. Through countless hours over the past 2.5 years, Cheekbone Beauty was born. So, Jen. Yay. Our next entrepreneur is Jordan Gellick. We'll get him up here as well. So, Jordan is a proud Métis husband and father. Jordan is the president and CEO of Carvel Electric, a family-owned Indigenous electrical service company. Jordan is an advocate for the advancement of Indigenous employment and business. As a master electrician, he has grown the small family-owned company from a pickup truck and a handful of clients to today working with some of Canada's largest energy, railroad, and pipeline companies. So Jordan. Our next entrepreneur is Stephen Narn. Mr. Narn served as, get Stephen up here. So he has served as the Lundin Foundation Managing Director since 2007. He serves on the advisory board for several small, medium enterprise funds and companies in sub-Saharan Africa, and is currently appointed as the professor at the University of British Columbia, where he teaches courses on country and project risk analysis in developing countries and African political economy. So, Stephen. So our next entrepreneur is Tara Fraser, CEO of Ravin Institute in Esquimalt Air. So Tara launched her aviation career as a commercial pilot. Becoming a pilot was transformational, truly giving the young Indigenous women wings. She loves to see others fall in love with flight. A natural entrepreneur, she built an aerial survey operation from the ground up and established the Aviation Leadership Foundation. She serves as a board of directors for British Columbia Aviation. So, Tara. So, Mel Green, Saloy with Native Diva Creation. Mel Green is from the Blood Tribe of Southern Alberta and resides in Calgary, Alberta. Mel Green operates her business out of her home and sets up shop in many local trade shows, conferences, and symposiums. Native Diva Creations utilizes web and social media to market herself and sell the products on a global scale. Mel Green's ultimate goal is to make her business long-lasting and to be able to pass the business down to her children, and to make First Nation beaded jewelry that is culturally appropriate for all people to wear and share her culture that does not offend but respect and support First Nation community. Mel Green. So I believe we have, hello? So I will just get comfy. So as an entrepreneur, I've been in the entrepreneurial world for about 15 years, working in industry, corporate Calgary, and in the education field. I welcome all of you guys today to Treaty 7 territory. I've been listening to your travel. Welcome to the cold. We've been getting blasted with it. So myself, I'm an entrepreneur, so I've been in my industry for about 15 years. I have gathered and gained valuable experiences that has led to my entrepreneurial journey. So I would invite you, and please help me and provide us today with how you started your entrepreneurial journey. And we'll start with,
So how I started, it actually was in a dream, which is really weird, and I hate saying this, and I feel like I've told this story now so many times, but it literally was. In 2015, it's January, it's the middle of the night, I wake up. But to preface that dream, I'd always envisioned and wanted to do something to support my First Nations community in some shape or form. I just had no idea what that looked like or what that would be. So this dream, there was a bunch of Native little girls, and they were covered in lip gloss. And so I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm like, shake my husband, and I said, this is it, this is what I'm gonna do. And he rolls over and goes back to sleep, because that's what husbands do. And I grabbed my laptop, and I was gonna make lip gloss, and I wanted to start a foundation in my grandmother's name, Emily Paul, who was a residential school survivor. It's to sell those lip gloss and create a scholarship fund for Indigenous youth. So that was the beginning of how it all started. And that only came after I got well myself and healed. So I had, we have this thing within our culture called generational trauma. So it wasn't until I got well and healed that I was able to now realize that I can go out and help other people.
So it's my turn. So Carvel Electric, I didn't start the company. My dad started the company, and it was about 1997. And I was a young kid, and we grew up working with my dad evening and weekends, learning how to be an electrician. And that is kind of like what brought the entrepreneurial spirit into me. Carvel Electric was, to him, it was an avenue to teach his sons how to be entrepreneurs, because he knew that the only way to be successful in life is to become an entrepreneur, start a business, and push yourself to see where you can go. So he kind of put that entrepreneurial spirit inside of me. And in about 2013, he was going to close the business down, which was really just a 1995 Silverado and like a bunch of old tools. And he's like, yeah, I'll take over the company. So at the time, I was working up at a SAGD site and quit my job, came back, took over the company, and literally went around knocking on doors, like wiring basements and going to our nation and trying to wire low-income housing. And then my brother came on, and it kind of just kept snowballing and snowballing. And now, today seems like such a blur, but today we work with all the major railroads in Alberta and some major pipelines and some of the clients in here, some oil and gas companies. So it's been quite a whirlwind for the last 5 years, and I'm sure we'll get a little deeper into it. But
So first, let me just say it's an honor and a privilege to be here. Ravin Capital Partners is an Indigenous-led social finance intermediary, and I think our origins really go back to a sense that the four of us as partners had around anger and injustice and disappointment. And I think the anger was largely driven by what we saw in Canada as the absence of patient risk capital for Indigenous enterprise. There really hasn't ever been a true venture capital intermediary that can support early stage and growth stage Indigenous enterprises with appropriate capital. And in our case, one that has a very high impact screen in terms of producing not only financial returns, but also community benefit streams back to local communities. And I think the disappointment is the other area we're working on. Some of you may have heard of social impact bonds. But really, we're working with Indigenous communities in creating what we call solutions labs, where we see opportunities to replace, in many cases, federal funding with market-based solutions where we think we can produce much better outcomes for communities, but also create systemic savings for taxpayers as well by identifying and scaling up really innovative Indigenous service delivery providers.
Tanse Kiwao, hello to all of you. Talking about my entrepreneurial journey, I was sitting here thinking, oh no, I wonder what's going to come out, because I only have a little bit of time to talk about that. But I have to start by telling you about becoming a pilot, because really getting my wings gave me wings for everything else in my life. And my first time ever in a small plane, the pilot was banking the aircraft. I had never been anywhere before. And we're in Africa, over the Okavango Delta in Botswana, and the pilot's banking the aircraft, and we're literally witnessing the land from the air. And I said to myself, this is the coolest job I have ever seen in my life. This is so awesome. I wonder what it would take to do this. I think that'd be pretty cool. And so I get down from that flight, and a few days later, the honeymoon's over, and I'm like, okay, let's review. You're a single mom, you have 2 kids, you're 30 years old, it's a few months post 9/11, there's no jobs, you have no financial support, and I get choked up every single time I say this. And what I said to myself was, that's just not possible for someone like you. A couple weeks later was my second time in a small plane. I went skydiving over the Okavango Delta in Botswana, and I will never forget that moment when the aircraft was taxiing out, and I said to myself, I don't care what it takes to do this, I'm going to make this thing possible. And a few months later, after my trip, I started my flying lessons, my first discovery flight, and within 1 year, I had a commercial pilot's license in hand. And so what that did, going to Africa in the first place, making that possible, becoming a pilot and making that possible, every single time I made something possible, the doors opened up for so much more possibility. So a little later in my journey, we had an economic setback in our country, and there were lots of layoffs. I said, I don't want to go to work for someone else. And in my industry, aviation is a very male-dominated industry. It just lacks diversity across the board. And so I said, well, maybe I just got to do my own thing. So I had done some photo survey flying, and I decided to start Keswick Aerial Survey. That was my first business. And I launched that business in 2010, and I sold it in 2016. And then my entrepreneurial journey went on to start the Ravin Institute, and now launching Esqueo Air. And Esqueo Air's official launch is International Women's Day on March 8th. And Esqueo is a Esqueo is a Cree word for woman, and I chose that name mindfully as an act of reclamation of womanhood, reclamation of matriarchal leadership, and reclamation of language. And then I'll have to update you later on down the road about my entrepreneurial journey and let you know how that goes.
I'm deeply afraid of heights. I don't think I could do anything you do.
I'm afraid of heights too, actually.
Hi, so my name is Mel Green, and my business is Native Diva Creations. My story is a little different. I had about 13 years retail experience in management. I ran large huge stores like the large H&M. I had huge staffs. I always knew I would do something fashion-wise, and retail just kind of hit home. I'm a teen mom, and I had my son in the last year of high school, so going into fashion school kind of wasn't in the plan. I needed to make money, I needed to support my family, so I started a retail job, and I literally started from the bottom. My first job ever, I was a stock girl. Then I was a part-time, then a full-time, then assistant, then a manager, and then I was district manager, so I went all the way up the train. Working in retail was great. I loved it. I learned so much. But after I had my second child, I wanted to spend more time at home, because with retail, you work all the time. All the long weekends, all Christmas, all holidays. I was tired of missing them. I wanted to spend more time with my family. So I had somebody in the community that said, well, there's this awesome, symposium. It's a camp for entrepreneurs. Just go check it out. Maybe you'll get some information. So I was like, sure, why not? I get to have a week away from my kids and have a break and learn stuff? Okay. So I went, and I learned amazing things. Something that I originally wanted to do was to sell supplies to other artists, not thinking that me as an artist would actually do anything or make money. I figured if I had a different product that was faster to get, I'd be able to sell faster and make money quicker. After going through the camp and doing a Dragon's Den-like pitch at the end, I got some amazing feedback from the bankers, and they asked me, well, what's your original idea? Like, what did you really want to do? I'm like, well, I bead, and I always wanted to do fashion, and that's something I want to do, but I don't have any background. I didn't go to university. I don't have any marketing experience, sales. It's all I have. And they said, well, everything you learned in retail will help you run your business. And I kind of was like, I had a huge aha moment. So I was like, well, no time like the present. I went home 2 days later, quit my job. So I was like, let's do it right now. There's no time like the present. I was motivated, and I was driven, and I wanted to do it. So with the support of my family and my community, I've been able to do some amazing things. I'm wearing some of my work right now. So is Heather. And I've been able to sell a lot of things and been able to pursue some amazing dreams. And I'm super excited for the next kind of steps to go forward. So that's me so far.
Thank you, guys. So, leading into my next question, one of the things that we face, as Indigenous people, we have barriers. So there's barriers that, that we're shy. Today I had to really build up my confidence to be up here. So thank you guys all for making this really awesome. So some of our barriers, being shy, entry to the marketplace, or even into your industry, how were you able to break down some of your own barriers getting into industry?
Well, I have no experience in the beauty industry whatsoever, so I think being naive to that actually saved me, because I might have chose selling pencils instead of lipsticks now, because the beauty industry is extremely, extremely competitive. But so there's all kinds of barriers, but I don't know, I'm with Tira, like when you start to realize that nothing is impossible, nothing is impossible. So you can figure it out as you're going along, and that's how I've been able to manage this. There's always going to be obstacles, that's life, right? So the challenge, and I think a true entrepreneur really thrives in solving problems. Like that's what we do, that's kind of in our blood. So any obstacles that I face, I've been able to overcome, and there's still gonna be tons along the way. But it's figuring it out. We have this thing called the internet makes everything incredible, because whatever problem you're facing, somebody else has as well. So just building your networks and using the tools at hand, and we can figure out just about anything. Because I asked a good friend of mine, she has a company, and it's a clothing line manufactured in Thailand in sustainable factories, and she does over $100 million a year in revenue. And I asked her not too long ago, I said, do you ever feel like you don't know what you're doing? And this was last year, and she said every day. So it doesn't matter if you're doing $1 million a year or $100 million a year, we're still all just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, awesome.
I think Jen is right. Anything is possible. I think the biggest barriers are the ones that we put in front of ourselves. The biggest barriers are our own fears and our own negative self-talk, and there's going to be always, and you know they're coming. You know the obstacles are coming. You know the challenges are coming, and you just face them full frontal and figure out a way up, over, around. And sometimes the obstacles also guide you. For me, when I think about when I was flying with a commercial service, and in the cockpit there was notable gender difference, generational difference, hierarchy, and what that did was inspire me to say, okay, this is tough. I better figure out a way to work with this, right? With this barrier. And that led me to taking some conflict resolution courses, which led me to an interest in leadership, which led me, from a grade 10 post-secondary education now to a master's degree in leadership, and now working on a PhD in human development. So, they're there. I think we all need to work together at reducing them. I think it's everyone's responsibility, including mine. And nothing is impossible when you set your mind to it, regardless of the barriers.
Maybe just to add one more thing. I think for us, as a new venture capital intermediary, we faced 3 barriers. First barrier was disbelief that there was a pool of Indigenous enterprise across Canada that could absorb responsibly a venture capital ticket. Second, that even if we could uncover those enterprises, there was no way of investing equity into Indigenous enterprises. They could only be fed debt, and debt would require collateral and a credit history and personal guarantees. Both of those assumptions, of course, now have been proven wrong. And I think the third one is that we couldn't execute as a team. We should have been 4 people in blue suits with Harvard MBAs, and we weren't. And I think our hypothesis around intermediation in the Indigenous enterprise space is we need a very different group of people. You need one person who understands principal investing and full cycle investing. We have 2 entrepreneurs on staff who've actually built and exited Indigenous businesses. And then we have a real focus on our 4th person who's really just there to help us build relationships and build trust, because equity investing is a form of marriage, and that marriage needs to move at the speed of trust, and it's really important that we take the time to do that. And we're 2 years in now, and we have so far convinced 8 or 10 investors to back us, and that movement is now really starting to go forward.
So if you look around this room right now, a lot of you are from oil and gas, a lot of large industry. So a barrier that our company faced was, how do you become, you're a new company, you're an Aboriginal business, you're a one-man band, how do I work for TransCanada? How do I work for Suncor? Like, how do you make that leap into going from driving around in a service van and fixing plugs for an old lady in her basement to working for Suncor or something, right? So that is a very large challenge. So I was fortunate earlier on in our career is I got to meet the CCAB folks, JP, shout out to them. And I got in a room and I just started asking questions. How do I work for large multinationals? And compliance is everything. As I just kept hearing, compliance, compliance, compliance. You got to get through our pre-qual. Got to get through our pre-qual. Well, what does that even mean? That is a massive hurdle for small businesses. So from year 1, we started, literally there's 2 people in our company. We would start tracking our hours, tracking our safety performance. I spent more on compliance than I did on tools. That is so important, and it's such a hurdle for small businesses. And if you're a small service company in this room and you're asking yourself, well, how do I work for these multinationals in this room? Day 1, track your hours, track your kilometers, track your safety performance, build the safety policies and procedures. That is paramount, and it's the only way that you're going to get into these companies and grow your company. So that's a word of advice, but that was the hurdle I kind of had to get through. So.
Well, as far as hurdles and struggles, they're constant, but they're something that I am able to learn from and know not to do again. And because I didn't go to school for business, I'm kind of doing trial and error. So a lot of it is asking my peers, asking my community, taking every kind of thing I can to learn. So I've been going to many seminars and going to other entrepreneurs and asking questions and going to larger businesses and asking them, what works for you? How can I work with you? Just making my network. And in the beginning, it was really, really tough because most Native businesses that sell jewelry or anything like that, most Natives don't want to buy Native-made jewelry because they always know somebody that knows how to make it. So they don't want to buy it, or they can make it themselves. So my biggest barrier in the beginning was kind of how was I able to market myself to non-Indigenous in a fashion that would work for both of us, where people can wear something of mine and they can be proud of it and they can speak to it and not have to worry about offending anybody or worrying about any of the kind of protocols that come behind them. And that's something that I really had to reevaluate with my business. And within doing that, I'm able to make my brand go further instead of just trying to stay within my community or within my city or within just my reserve of the people that are there and the items that I make. So definitely the barriers are constant, but again, I'm definitely learning from all of them.
Thank you. So when we look at, our barriers, I am just dying to ask this question, but so when we have, our entrepreneurship, it takes a lot to actually get to a point where, we feel that we're successful. But when we look at entrepreneurship, where we are today, the challenges and the barriers that we faced, do you have a specific example or experience of where you actually wanted to throw the towel in and give up on entrepreneurship or, and get that full-time job of what you're really skilled to do? So, yeah.
I think I've wanted to throw the towel in numerous times. But that's the life of an entrepreneur. It's up and down. So with all of the barriers comes obviously these great lessons that we're learning. And a lot of times the biggest mistakes that we make, whether in business or in life, we learn the most from, right? So there's been several occasions, packaging for me coming in and, wording not being right and just things like that where you're like, oh, come on. But you figure it out. But there's lots, and it's, there's so many instances like that where you're at the you're at the mercy of your vendors and your suppliers so that you're waiting on products. And you work it out, right? But there's lots of those moments where you want to throw the towel in, but you don't. True entrepreneurship is an extreme passion. And I heard someone ask this once, like if it's 4 o'clock in the morning and someone said, this is happening with Cheekbone and we need you there, would you be there? And the answer is always yes. So when the day that it's no, then I know I'm not doing the right thing, but for now it's still yes.
Yeah. I've never really wanted to just quit, but I do catch myself daydreaming when someone's like making my coffee at Starbucks, just like, oh, I wish I could just have that person's job or just like push that broom. Like, look how simple that looks. Like, sometimes I catch myself daydreaming about that, but like I love what I do, and I'm passionate about what I do, and I love the industry, and I love meeting people and creating connections. So entrepreneurship to me is just, or even running a business is just, to me, this is what I love doing. So I never really wanted to throw in the towel, but I definitely have thought about how easy it would be to just do something else.
Yeah, so thinking about a time that you want to throw in the towel, so like this morning, yesterday, last week, last month, last year. Honestly, there's times when you're just like, this is just too freaking hard. Like, this is hard. And you can't quit yourself. Like you have a job and you're not so happy with your job, you can be just like, hey dude, here's my 2 weeks notice, I'm out of here. And like when you're an entrepreneur, you can't quit. I have the word liberty tattooed on my foot, so like I like to be able to have choices. And at the same time, that's equally matched by how many times I am overwhelmed with gratitude for being able to make my own choices and design my own destiny. And both those overwhelm of gratitude and also those, this is too frickin' hard, I wish I could throw in the towel, both come with lots of tears, and that's okay.
I definitely second all of everything that you said, because it's all the same. It's on a constant basis where I'm like, wow, this is just too much. Why am I doing this again? Am I making myself do this? You know, and I kind of just want to be done. I want to just be able to clock in and clock out and sleep whenever I feel like it. But my business is 24/7 and it doesn't stop. But I'm so passionate about it that I could never think about doing anything else again. I don't ever want to work for somebody else. I wouldn't mind employing more, so then that way I can help my community and be able to relay back those those teachings of being able to work for yourself and be partners within a business.
So thank you. So I am big. So I do a lot of volunteer work myself. I'm a volunteer member for the Aboriginal Friendship Center of Calgary. I do a lot of volunteers. I do a lot of volunteer recruitment for the work that I do. So I'm an entrepreneur, but I also have a part-time job as well. So I believe in giving back to the community. So one of the things that our communities today, you know, we have so much Indigenous success, and truly you guys are all very amazing individuals. So what are some ways that you engage in your community and give back?
The reason Cheekbone Beauty exists was to give back to my community. So this is a really easy question for me to answer. It's everything that the entire company is about. I say that we use lipstick as a platform to empower Indigenous youth and to create opportunities to create awareness for non-Indigenous people to see that there's still a lot of social injustices that occur within our communities, especially with our youth. And the organization that we specifically support is Shannon's Dream, which is a branch of the First Nation Child and Family Caring Society of Canada that Cindy Blackstock is the executive director of. And I am so, so proud to say that within these last 2 years, we have donated over $5,000. And this is just my small little company that we've been able to do that. And it's the reason I'm doing this work. So it's everything to me, and it's everything to the company.
So when my dad started Carvel Electric, it was like an avenue for him to help his family and his friends through hiring and promoting people to become apprentices in the trades and get your ticket. So I remember growing up, anyone that would come from our settlement in Manitoba, they'd come to Alberta, the first person they'd go see is Silvio. Like, go see Silvio, you'll become an electrician. Like, there's so many electricians in Alberta that are Métis that came through his hiring or employment program that he kind of created out of nowhere. It's just he knew that if you have a good job, you can have a good life, and that is ingrained into me. So it's the cornerstone of Carvel Electric is how can I create opportunity for our Métis people and our First Nations, and how do I do that? We give out apprenticeships, and with a good job at a Red Seal trade, you can have a good life, and it opens a lot of doors. So today we have multiple programs in our company around hiring First Nations Métis employees. And a really great one is we work with the local high school, and every year we bring in a grade 12 student. They work for us in the afternoons and the evenings and weekends, and they get their blue book and they become an apprentice right in high school. And we've had 3 students come out of high school, 2 Métis, 1 First Nations, and they're full-time employees in our company. And it's a way to build Indigenous capacity in our company and also push these kids to graduate high school. Like, believe it or not, in Stony Plain, 50% of the Indigenous students drop out. Like, that is a crazy number, and we have to fix that somehow. So that's my way of helping our local high school. And I'm also always chatting with youth groups and going to business mixers and just chatting about how entrepreneurialism and how to and the advantage of pushing yourself to be an entrepreneur and just the doors it opens and the people you meet. So, yeah.
So we all come from different parts of Canada at Ravin Capital Partners, so our strategy is not local, it's more national. Really, our focus is on creating the next generation of Indigenous entrepreneurs, so it's all around capacity building and wraparound support for entrepreneurs. So we have three parts to our strategy. Number one is we are contractually obligated in our internal shareholders agreement to donate 20% of our profits to our foundation, the Ravin Foundation. Secondly, our investors have contributed almost $600,000 this year alongside their investment in the fund to support that. And third, we've started an internship program for Indigenous MBA students to come into our organization and really to try to democratize the skills of venture capital so that we're seeding the next generation of investors that can support Indigenous enterprise.
Oh, you guys are rocking it, eh? That's awesome. I think for me, when starting my aerial survey company, Kisik Aerial Survey, as an entrepreneur, and having a very successful business is what lifted me out of poverty. And it's what lifted my family out of poverty and has allowed me to continue to give back and contribute in lots of ways. So I'm always asking the question everywhere that I go, how do we co-create the conditions for Indigenous peoples in business to thrive, like to really thrive? And I offer my time and energy in support of those efforts. I have a business called the Ravin Institute. It's a for-profit business. You wouldn't know that, but I should probably, because what I do, even though it's a for-profit business, is I haven't taken any money out of that business, and I keep reinvesting it in new initiatives to support Indigenous peoples. So the Ravin Institute has launched what's called Ravin Speak, which is about amplifying the voices of Indigenous peoples. Our vision is Indigenous peoples visible, masterful, amplified, and connected. And thanks to Tech, who's here today, helped to get the Mastery program off the ground. This is the first cohort, and it launched in February. And out of that Ravin Speak program also came a circle, a champion circle of Indigenous women and media. And it's called Amplifying the Voices of Indigenous Women in Media. How can we work together with media to help re-narrate or at minimum reflect a more accurate narrative about Indigenous peoples in our country, and show how successful entrepreneurs that we are, and our resilience and our strength and our wisdom. And I give back a lot in my, as I said, in my energy. I just started another initiative that's going to launch on March 16th. I got a lot of launches happening, holy. Good thing I have to take flight. And it's called Give Them Wings, and it's launching on March 16th, and it's an initiative to inspire Indigenous youth to take flight. And because I was 30 years old before I had any exposure to flight at all, our youth category is 15 to 39. So those are just a couple of the ways in which we give back.
Well, being the small business that I am, giving back monetary is a little more difficult, but I also give as much of my time as possible to mentoring other artists, starting up businesses, sharing information, starting platforms, making platforms for other local Indigenous artists. Being a struggling artist is a real thing. Learning firsthand how that can be. So I definitely want to make sure that I can try to pay it forward. the beginning, I had quite a bit of help from people in my community. Like I said, I had no idea where was I going to sell my merchandise, how was I going to sell my merchandise. So I, as well as my sister, we actually started a local, it's something small, it's a craft show, but we started with $100 in our pocket, and we're on our 4th year this year. Well, this year will be our 5th year. We started with 20 local artists. Now we have over 100 within 2 days, all within the Treaty 7 area, as well as further to Saskatchewan and BC that come in now. Everything is handmade, local, and authentic. We want to help promote those artists, give them a platform, help them network with other artists, because word of mouth is one of the best ways for artists to learn and grow and get those business networks, and as well as joining other committees within my city to help promote those artists and be that voice for the authentic Indigenous artists in the city as well as the surrounding areas.
Thank you. So we have a question from the audience. This one, I believe we can all answer. So what is one piece of advice, message you would give, that you would like to give the industry leaders when they begin to think with engaging with Indigenous communities and entrepreneurs?
I think when I read that question, the first word that came to my mind was empathy, and thinking about that deeply. I mean, all of us as people in business with relationships with one another, professionally and within our own communities and our families, when we truly sit down at any table with someone, if we really try to get a deep understanding of things from their perspective, so that requires a lot of listening. So I think deep empathy.
I think when industry leaders come into a community or they're engaging, they need to really think about, if it's a project, for instance, and I think Jeff Provost from Bird said it great this morning as he talked about, like, don't overcomplicate the work packages or make them so large that the community can't even be involved in that project. I see that too often where we get a large project put in front of us and like, I can't do any of this. We can't even handle this financially. We don't have the capacity or the knowledge to do this. So just really thinking about how do you break down the projects you have so that the community actually has capacity to do it, so that they can grow to do larger projects in the future, is just really something that we need to see more of. And yeah, that's a simple one. Not really, but.
Yeah, I think for us, the key message is that building trust is a process, not an event. And for individuals and communities that have gone through intergenerational trauma, it is not something that can be rushed or discarded or formalized. And it is to say that it is a long-term relationship that is front and center before the business, which will logically ensue if you can build those strong foundations.
I would invite industry leaders to really think about the fact that Indigenous peoples, since time immemorial, have been entrepreneurs, innovators, creators, and that what they bring, what Indigenous peoples, what we bring with our worldview is really important. And when you can invite a whole other way of seeing and being and knowing into your team, into your project, into your organization, it is able to untap and unleash a whole nother layer of creativity and innovation. The Indigenous worldview, I think that our entire planet would benefit from a remembering and a returning to Indigenous worldview. And I would just invite you to consider how blessed it is to be able to share in that rich knowledge that is often offered so generously.
I think as simple as engaging, starting a conversation, asking questions, listening. I think listening is the most important thing you can do. There are many different forms of different in the Indigenous communities that have different protocols for different things. So just understanding the people that are originally on the land of where you currently reside is super important. And in that, you're just asking those simple questions of, in a respectful manner, what works for you guys? How can we partner together? How can we come to an understanding? So just listening and asking a lot of questions, but coming from a very respect place, I think is really important.
I just want to add one thing to what Tira said, because I think it bears restatement. I think more than half of Canadians, probably 3/4, are in one of two camps: people who view Indigenous entrepreneurs or people with a sense of pity, I wish there was something more I could do to help, or the other side with a sense of disdain. They have been left behind and will never join the economy. And I think from an engagement perspective, the most important guideline for business is to view Indigenous people as a potential source of knowledge and innovation in this country, which really requires a real leap in terms of where our thinking has been over the last couple of centuries at least.
Okay, so I am going to lead into another question, and I guess this one is one of most challenges that entrepreneurs face is access to capital. So when we're looking at access to capital, I'm pretty lucky to have an opportunity to sit at the Community Futures Treaty 7 Business Resource Table. So we try and voice a lot of entrepreneurial barriers and all of that. So we address them, we try and develop programs to be able to work with them. But when you look at your own capital, we have, as an entrepreneur, we have to support ourselves, our family, and not only that, but our own business. So how easy was it for you? Well, not easy, but how was it, how was access to capital, how did you get started with that? And whether you're in startup or in expansion.
So I still call my business a startup because we are still that seed just sprouting through the dirt right now. But we had no capital. From that night, from that dream, I entered into a conference and mentorship program through AUBN, which was through NWAC, the Native Women's Association of Canada. So and at the end of the conference, they ended up giving us all a check for $500. So I took that $500 and registered my business, set up my online store, and that was the beginning, and that is the only money that has been given to me since. So I've completely bootstrapped my business, and I believe there's a lot of power in that because I was using the model from a guy named Eric Ries, who wrote a book called The Lean Startup, and that was like when you're creating a company, to prove to the market is going to prove whether your business is successful or not, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's our customers that decide if the business is successful. And in the book, he's basically describing, make whatever you can or whatever your vision is for the business, the company, the project, the product, as less expensive as possible, and then put it out there and see what happens. So I've been doing that basically since day one, and in year two, I literally, in year one, probably spent about $40,000 of my own personal money. I've never taken grants or funding from anyone. And in year two, we have zero debt and money in the bank. So that's bootstrapping.
Nice.
So I had this one project that, there's one project that kind of catapulted our company into the industrial world, and I won a bid to do a pump station for Burlington North Santa Fe Rail, and I won the job. I met with the engineer, and he's like, "Do you think you could do this project?" I was like, "Oh yeah." It was about a $300,000 bid. I walked out of the meeting. I was like, "I need to get some cash," so I literally got a bunch of credit cards. I built one of the most flagship projects for Burlington North Santa Fe Rail with like 3 Visa cards, and I remember I was paying like people with credit cards. It was crazy, and I was paying our wholesalers, and they were just all maxed out. And I remember once we commissioned the building, I flew down there, we commissioned the building, and the engineer's like, "You guys did a great job, and it was an outstanding project." I was like, "That's great. Okay, I need to get paid because I'm actually scared that I can't even fly home." So So cash is always difficult to come by. Like, you can't just, even bankers, even when you're doing millions of dollars, they're still under a microscope staring at you like, well, like, how much equity do you have in your house, Like, no one's just giving you cash. So that's always a challenge. It's always a challenge for business. It's not even just Indigenous business. It's small business. It's every business, is access to capital. It's always based on your past performance, not what's coming down the line, right? So if your past performance is this, but you're going here, you can't sell the future to a bank, right? So there's always that trouble, and that's business. As you grow, you're going to have to prove yourself from your past performance to get capital. So I haven't figured it out fully yet, but I'm sure someone in here has got an answer.
I want to just add to Jordan, you can sell the future to a venture capitalist. And this is the distinction between sort of balance sheet investing and really business or character and story-based investing. So I hope we are in the process of finding a solution. I think the story at Ravin is quite closely paralleling Jen. We really bootstrapped. I think all of us kept a foothold in our pre-existing professions until such time as we reached a tipping point, which was last summer, when we felt like we had enough traction in the market to leave and go forward. But we have still gone through a period of 7 or 8 months with very small paychecks, but we're thrilled to be in open water, and we can see a very bright future. But there is a valley of death that you have to traverse in any kind of business, and the hope, of course, is that you will find the right kind of partners and advisors to help you through that transition and through to the other side.
Yeah, I've bootstrapped everything I've done, for sure. When I started my aerial survey company, I had never made more than $34,000 a year, supporting my family on that. My assets were, I think, equity of about $2,000 in a Volkswagen Rabbit. Literally. And 2 things happened to allow Keswick Aerial Survey to get off the ground. One of them was a grant from Tallyhout Aboriginal Capital Corporation, which I am deeply, deeply grateful for. And of course, with that comes a commercial financing component. And I had a banker that believed in me. I don't think anybody was going to give me no money, for sure. And I don't know, she just was inspired by the story, and she decided to take a risk. As a banker, you've got like your own little decisions that you can make, and so everything that she could do that was within her ability to do, she pulled lots of got really creative, and she just supported me. I had no idea what it was like to have someone that is in a place to be able to lend you money that is like really rooting for you and really beside you and really wanting for you to succeed. And so I think that, when I ask the question everywhere I go, which is how do we together co-create the conditions for Indigenous businesses to thrive, Indigenous peoples in business to thrive, access to capital and supports to get off the ground. If it wasn't for that woman, her name was Gail, I don't know that I would have ever got started. So super, super grateful.
In the beginning, I kind of did the same things aligned as Jen. When I went to this symposium, at the end, I was gifted $500. And so with that, I went home. Like I said, I quit my job, decided on a business, registered it, got my trade, bought a little bit of supplies, recycled the money back in. Within the first 6 months, the Blood Tribe Economic Development had a grant available, so I applied. I got $5,000, was able to buy a lot more supplies, was able to pay in for larger trade shows. I was able to go to Santa Fe Fashion Week in 2015 to showcase my work. So now there I sell in 7 different galleries. So with that little bit of extra, I was able to build the business even bigger. Within my first year, I was just recycling. Second year, definitely recycling it back in. I'm now in my 4th year of business. I definitely make more money than I ever made working retail. So I can pay myself, pay my family. I can do everything that I love and enjoy and make money on the side. So I think that's the ultimate goal as an entrepreneur, is to make money, but to be able to pay yourself is a whole other thing instead of just being able to filter it back into your business.
Yeah, and I just, if I can, I want to add one more thing to part of my story, because the grant and the commercial financing, and of course my own contribution, which was everything was made possible by so many different people. So my contribution wasn't even really my contribution because I didn't have any money, but I borrowed off of a friend of mine's line of credit to be able to put my portion in. And then there was the camera. So you're buying an airplane, a little airplane, but the piece of camera equipment, it was $1 million piece of equipment manufactured by Microsoft. And 3D, very sophisticated camera, big 400-pound camera that gets mounted in the belly of the aircraft to take really sophisticated 3D imagery for mapping engineering. And so I went to the camera company. They didn't do financing, and I convinced them to allow me, it was the first and only time they had done that, to allow me to make payments. And again, it's that tenacity, that perseverance, figuring out what you need, and then finding it and asking for it.
Thank you. So question for Jordan. Were you able to access any loans or grants through Apitigosin Métis Development?
Yeah, I did use Apitogasin to purchase a few trucks for our fleet. Great organization owned by the Métis Nation of Alberta, gives available access to Métis entrepreneurs. So if you're a Métis citizen, I highly suggest using Apitogasin. Mike Ivey, the manager, great guy. So it's a resource for sure.
Thank you. So question for Tara. If you had to do it again, what would you do different?
Yeah, I've been looking at that question going, oh my God, what am I going to say to them? Do I tell them the truth? I don't know. What would I do differently? So very early on, actually when I had the idea for this airline in the beginning, which was over a decade ago, I went to a really successful businessman, and I went with all my business plans and all my numbers and all of those, great things, lots of paper. I went with lots of paper. And to get this amazing wisdom that I thought we were going to spend hours, I was going to spend hours receiving all of this business wisdom. And he said, I think the biggest advice that I have for you is be very, very careful who you go into business with. And he was really sure about that. And he said, I don't know if there's any media or videotaping here, but I'll share it with you anyways. He said, going into business with someone is like a marriage. It's just as hard or harder to do the work to communicate, and there's no sex. So, so be very, very careful who you go into business with. So what would I do differently? And this was the piece, actually, I'm going to share a bit of a vulnerable piece that I don't always talk about. The sale of my company, Kisik Aerial Survey, was a necessary step to disentangle myself from a former spouse. And so talking about who you go into business with and how you protect yourself in business. And it was heartbreaking to build something from the ground up and be forced to let it go. And so I suppose what would I do differently? Not a lot, but actually it was something that I had never even conceived of. It wasn't anything in I thought about all the different setbacks that could come, but it's something that I never really considered. And so what would I do differently? Understand or spend a little bit of time thinking about what are the worst things that can happen, and how might you prepare for them and protect yourself in the meantime. And then you got to start from scratch all over again, and the fun begins or continues.
Thank you. So, question for Jordan. Do you feel or get resistance from industry on letting youth gain work experience and apprenticeship? And how did you work through that?
So really that would just be our high school rap students. Like a 16-year-old student can't really go work on an oil and gas facility. So I guess there would be resistance, but it's more around policy and safety, and I completely agree with that. You have to be competent and qualified and to get on these facilities. But industry is really pushing to have more apprentices. And once those kids graduate from high school, they're 18 years old, we get them all certified, and then we can bring them onto those facilities. But actually, CP Rail once allowed us to have a young gentleman in high school that had all his safety for that site come onto site just to see what we were working on and kind of get that experience. So there is certain companies that, under the right criteria, will allow us to bring high school students onto the facility if they're doing something that's within a safe work environment and they're watched after by a competent employee.
You know, that's interesting to me because, like, you can fly an airplane at 14 years old, right? Which takes, seriously. So, I think sometimes just generally we underestimate and undervalue the contribution that our youth make. They have incredible wisdom to bring to the table that may be different than everyone else in the room. And that's actually what makes it that much richer and more important. And I think young people should be invited to all kinds of environments, including the decision-making table.
Sweet, thank you. So another question from the audience for Jen. Cheekbone beauty products available for purchase today at the conference?
No, unfortunately not. They're not, but you can purchase them online.
Okay, thank you. Also another general question. Do you find it harder to bid for work because you are small, or do large oil companies like to work with small businesses?
Yes. It is difficult as a small company to work for large companies. You've heard it throughout this conference that right now in Alberta, large companies are consolidating their supplier base, and they would rather use a large electrical company, for instance, and cover all their facilities than break out small contracts for small companies. But once they start working with the small company and they realize that the owner's there every day, and they realize that actions happen and there's attention to detail and customer service, I think they prefer to work with small companies. So keep that in mind.
Sweet, thank you. So I'm going to have one more question, and this question is maybe a word of advice, that you would give to aspiring entrepreneurs. I turn a lot to my traditional knowledge keepers, my elders, and I have a lot of mentors that I look up to be able to help me through the challenges that I face as an entrepreneur. I'm not only as an entrepreneur, but a woman and, and all of that. So one piece of advice you would give to aspiring entrepreneurs or anybody that wants to look at, being their own boss?
Well, what's going to separate you from other businesses and basically your competition? So what's your differentiator? What sets you apart from everybody else in your industry? And I probably highlight this because I'm in such a competitive industry. And what I've been able to do is leverage something called data, which is really, really powerful. I'm collecting data on a nation of people that the beauty industry has never tapped into. And I've made it to the final rounds of Sephora has an accelerator program for beauty brands. This year, the competition is extremely fierce. It's a global, they pick 12 women from around the world to enter their accelerator program that they'll host in San Francisco in April, but I know I'm in the final rounds. I haven't heard anything, but March 8th, I think this International Women's Day is an important day because that's when they announce the people they pick. So when I went to them and sat around with them in their boardroom, that was what I went to them with, was collecting data. And I think Jordan spoke to that earlier about just knowing who you're doing business with and understanding it from that perspective is really important. So know who you're talking to.
So advice I'd give someone that's thinking of going to business is why. Ask yourself why I want to go into business. If you can't answer why I want to become an entrepreneur or why I want to go into business, please don't go into business. Because once it gets difficult, you need to have something that you go fall back on. Like, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm going to push through all these challenges, because there's a reason why I'm doing this. And you have to be passionate about it. So your why and your passion kind of have to be one. And your passion for what you do, if you don't like what you do, you're just going to give up on it. So really make sure you like what you do, you're passionate about it, and understand why you're doing it, and understand the end goal too. Like, I want to start a business because of this. And if it's not going to get you to there, then maybe just don't start a business. Maybe go work for somebody and it'll get you to that spot, right? So understand your why, be passionate about it, and just be, yeah, that's about it.
Well, I remember being a young entrepreneur in my 20s, which is now a long time ago, and driving with my first business mentor, and we came to a stop sign. And I turned to him and asked the question straight, and he shook his head and looked at me and he said, "No, forward." And the reason I bring this story up is for all entrepreneurs, there is no linear path to success. It will never be a straight line. Everybody up here has had self-doubt, probably self-pity. And the key is having belief and conviction and the willingness to adapt and be agile when you need to respond to new opportunities.
So the advice that I would have is engage Indigenous peoples in everything. Our world will be different and our world will be better when we have Indigenous peoples at all levels of, represented at all levels of leadership, at the decision-making table, in business, shifting our economy. And the advice that I would have, not just in business, but in anything that you're passionate about. My tagline mantra is dream it, design it, do it. Just dream it, design it, and do it. Literally, just dream it, and design it, and then do it. Whatever it is that you want for yourself, because it's time. It's time for Indigenous peoples, and it's time for you, and whatever it is that you want to make happen in your life. And know the setbacks are coming, and accept that, and be ready for them, and just persevere through anything that gets in your way from what matters for you. Stand fiercely with deep love for what matters to you.
I second most of that as well. I think it would be more on just keep trying. You're going to keep falling. Got to pick yourself back up and keep going. You're going to fall again and fall again. Learn from every single trip. Then you'll end up looking more. You'll get to see, well, why did I fall? Okay, I won't fall again. I'll go around that time. I won't do that again. And just don't listen to naysayers. There will be many people out there that tell you that your business isn't feasible. You're not going to have no longevity. You don't have anything that's going to work. Or your business, because of the economy, isn't going to work. The best lesson I ever learned is the best time to start a business is when the economy isn't great, because people are looking to save and people are looking for local. People are trying to help within their own economy, and the best time is to have a small business, and that is when you thrive the most. So when things are really hard, you never know. You just need to jump in full feet. So yeah.
Sweet, thank you. So that is our time for today. I am very honored to be up here with all of you guys. It's a great learning experience, and I wish you guys all nothing but success in your entrepreneurial journey. One word that stuck out to me is it is time.
It's time,
It
it's
is
time,
time.
it's time, it's time.
Yes. So thank you very much to each and every one of you. And yeah, let's mingle some more.